So welcome. Thank you so much for coming on board to do this. I was particularly delighted that, when you actually said, let's have a conversation, that you were really open ears to hear about Kriya, which is fantastic. And I really enjoyed our conversation around that. And I just hope that, that gave you an insight of what we're trying to do that's different, and why our students, will hopefully come up with questions that might be different as well. So hello, everyone. We're delighted to have Mona with us today, and I'll kick this off with a very short introduction. While all of you may have received some information, but we do have some others who have joined. Mona comes with close to 2 decades of recruiting experience in India as well as abroad. Spent close to 13 years in San Francisco with tech giants like Google, Yahoo, and Salesforce. And in India, you've worked with companies like Microsoft and Zomato and Uber, so primarily with very large tech conglomerates before you moved to another huge conglomerate in the media industry, which is Group M. To some extent, my initial years were in JWT, so there was all part of the huge family. So fabulous that move. And you've spent a large bit into technology, and now with this media, and just that whole experience of hiring would be extremely valuable for our students today. Mona is a fitness freak, enjoys traveling and collecting refurbished furniture. So when I read that, I thought, we will have a separate session on that. Most definitely. That's going to be very interesting. So thank you very much, Mona, for doing this. We primarily have our undergraduate students here on this, and some of them have logged in with their parents as well. So there's a fair bit of interest. This is the first cohort, and hence what's going to happen out there would be great to hear such insights. So without wasting too much time, I'm going to kind of get around to asking some specific questions. And is there anything you want to say before I kind of kick off on the question bit? Sorry, Mona, over to you if you want to say a few words out there.
Absolutely, Kala. And first of all, thank you so much for having me on this platform. I'm delighted to share my experience and answer any questions that the students may have. I think having worked in so many different countries and with so many different companies, I would be delighted to answer questions that the students will have, because I know when I was a student, I always fretted about what the future has in store for me and what I'm doing. Will I get a good job? Will I not? Will I be successful? So, always happy to help, and, very excited about what Kriya is doing, because I think what you guys are doing is phenomenal. And I love the fact that, it's all about new age learning.
Thank you so much. Kind words. So let me, what I've put together is some questions which broadly students tend to ask, and then we can delve more. We've got time, of course, to raise specific questions. So from your background and insight, what are some key hiring trends you've observed in the recent years, specifically for undergraduate hiring?
Absolutely. So it's very interesting, right? The trend in the market has moved across being very data centric. So data has become the means to everything in today's day and age. Now, it cuts across all industries. So it's not only specific to tech, but it also cuts across media. Media has become very data centric now. Be it pharma, be it auto, be it any other industry that you pick up, data is at the core of it. So even in a function like HR, it's very data centric. So you'll be surprised that for all students, be it if you have an economics background, or if you have a background in literature, if you have, a multidisciplinary background, you still need to keep adding to it, right? And your approach needs to be, very statistical when you're looking at whatever function you're doing.
Fair enough. So in terms of how to, and that's kind of linked to segue into the next one. So as a recruiter, how do you view students with multidisciplinary backgrounds? Some comes with psychology or politics and history or the sciences. So how do you view such a candidate?
So in my opinion, those candidates are a lot more holistic compared to other candidates. So they bring a lot more to the table, right? And half of the battle is already won because they possess skills which maybe other functions don't have. but it's very functional based. So when hiring happens in any company across any industry, you might not be a fit for a particular function or role, but you will be an excellent fit for another function and role within the same industry or within the same company,
Fair
right?
enough.
So there is no such thing as a candidate who's not a fit for an organization. It really depends on what you want to do and where your interest lies.
Yeah. And hence, do you see that let's take the liberal arts and sciences students. So do you see that they bring something different from a standalone engineering or IT degree student? I'm assuming you're kind of hiring all sorts of graduates. So have you seen any difference at all, evidently?
So again, Kala, it's really dependent on the function. So let's say if I have, someone who comes with a psychology degree and they want to get into HR, for example, they're a great fit because they understand the psychology of humans, which till date I don't, honestly, even after so many years of experience. But it's all about what is it that you really want to do, and your experience can flow across many different industries. So it's not driven by an industry, but it's driven by a function, right? So an engineer, on the other side, on the flip side, might be bringing skills that maybe an art student does not have, or a liberal art student does not possess, and vice versa. But it really depends on the role that they want to do and and the career they want to take forward.
So I guess most of the career planning, if you like, is not so much dictated by the company, or it's more dictated by what do I want to get up each morning and want to do, and where do I want to
Exactly.
work within that, isn't it? And hence, have you seen a trend in terms of any kind of companies that you think most typically tend to recruit liberal arts and sciences students? What kind of companies? Is
I
it?
think all companies. I
Wow.
think all companies across all industries, this is a skill which is required, right? So a company is made up of a whole lot of different functions. So in, let's say, for example, a technology company, let's take a small startup, for example. Let's take Zomato as an example. So within that, you'll have an engineering function, you'll have a product management function, you will have a sales function, you'll have a marketing function, you'll have an HR function, you'll have a legal function, and so on and so forth, and the list just goes on. But besides that, there's another trend, which is something called growth, right? These are people who come with an economics background and have done a master's degree, who look at different streams of revenue to grow the company. So there's so many things that come together in order for a company to grow that it's very difficult to say, okay, this skill works for this industry and it does not work for any other industry.
Fair enough. So from what you're saying, it also means that some of these roles seem to be evolving as well, because growth was never a role that was ever before identified. And then you're talking about this whole learning and development within as part of employee retention. So you're beginning to see some of those new roles emerge as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think the industry itself is evolving. We are seeing a whole lot of different companies which never existed before, which we never thought in our right frame of mind that we would be using such companies, and they're new age organizations that are catering to the needs of the growing populations. So, I think with that, roles are also evolving because they're realizing that they need those roles in order to grow. So, for example, when I was working at Uber, which is again a new age disrupting company, they had unique roles like policy. Now, in my career, it's a very recent thing that I've heard about, and you and I also had a conversation with regards to this. So, policy is something which is again very nascent, but it's become very, very critical to the ecosystem of an organization, because that's what helps them work very closely with the government body and drive different policies and mandates. And it's a very interesting field.
That's very interesting, because you often think students who think they want to work policy have to work with research think tanks, have to work with quasi-government or consulting, but would never think of applying policy to something like Uber.
Exactly.
Which is pretty interesting. So if you were looking at a fresh graduate and said that irrespective of the role, and these are fresh graduates, they kind of adapt in terms of take the shape of the vessel they kind of go into, what would be the 5 top skills you look for them to thrive in any role that they are pushed in? If you were going to say,
yeah. So I think a key thing to understand is it's all about selling yourself, right? Ultimately, when we're getting into the market, it's about how you sell yourself. Now, you have to realize a recruiter goes through, on an average, over 100 resumes in a day. So first of all, how do you make your resume stand out, right? How are you selling yourself? What are those key things? And trust me, when you're going through 100 resumes in a day, you're just looking at key points and you're browsing through resumes. So no one has time to look through very long resumes and they get rejected right away, right? So how crisp is your resume? Are you getting the point across? And then innovative thinking. How creative are you? What have you done, or what kind of skill have you achieved or gotten or studied for that is not part of your project? What are you doing over and above? So you need to go beyond your space and learn something new. You need to show that you're a go-getter, confidence. So these are some things at the basic resume level that stand out. And obviously, when you have a conversation with someone in recruitment or with a hiring manager for a role, you always need to remember that you cannot be unsure about yourself. Confidence is very, very critical. You cannot say, I can do marketing, but I would also like to do sales. You know, when someone starts talking to me like that, then it just does not interest me, because you yourself don't know what is it that you are interested in and where you want to drive your future.
Interesting. So it's really beyond, I think you're talking at a very different level. So it's not about all those things you put on a resume, that I'm an active team player, I'm a communicator, or any of that. You're basically looking for something else completely. You know, what's the content in that resume that's actually exciting to me, and clarity of thought, which is difficult to actually put on paper, which is interesting. Let's talk a bit about some of the disciplines, right? We touched on economics, and somehow a degree in economics seems to be like the be all and end all of many things. And this I've noticed across what's happening today, what used to happen 5 years ago, and in the US, hugely the number of students taking into economics. So if we were looking at, and you touched on this, is the degree itself good enough? Does it mean that getting an economics degree, you kind of make it anywhere in the corporate organization? How would you place that?
See, in my opinion, when it comes to, if you're asking me specifically about economics, yeah, I mean, there are tons of jobs that you can do. Again, it's going to be based on your interests. You can go into a legal field, or you can, again, do policy or sales, marketing, analysis, you know, so on and so forth. But it's really driven by your interests. And I think just doing an undergrad is not enough, unfortunately, in today's time. So yes, maybe you can join an organization, work for a year or two, gain some experience, try to figure out what is it that you're really interested in. And then after that, pursue your academics in something which you are really interested in, be it data, be it machine learning, be it AI, be it policy, be it anything else, or product management, or, you know, but you need to keep adding on to your skills, because in today's day and age, it's all about upskilling yourself.
Yeah. So which means clearly success in workplace to some extent is not just dependent on study. You're talking about, doesn't matter what you study, and even irrespective, what have you done over and beyond your education, right? Which is, so I had this interesting case study where I wanted to ask you that, would it matter if a student, for instance, did a bachelor's in history, but went ahead and did, I've done a project here and I've tried this, I've worked on this new language, all of that, but has a bachelor's in history, versus anybody who I may have done economics, but I just come up with a bachelor in economics. So, and hence, how do you look at two profiles? And would it matter the student with a bachelor's in history? And where do, again, I'm going to connect back to, and hence, how do degrees like history or philosophy or politics kind of compare in the current age?
So that's a very good question, Kala. Now, obviously, again, I'm going to harp on the same thing. It's driven by what is it that you're interested in? What kind of a role are you applying? So if you're applying, let's say, for a role in HR, for example, it's going to be the way you come across and your understanding of the organization, of the business, right? There might be two people with degrees in history and they might have very different understanding. Or you might be interested in, let's say, for example, policy, right? Maybe you might do well with an economics degree versus a history degree, but because you have it's all about how you carry yourself. And it's all about, especially with an undergrad degree, because I think even corporate organizations with an undergrad degree, they want to invest in you, right? They want to invest in what is it that you want to do and help you upskill. So do remember that you need to be very clear in your head in terms of this is what I want to do and this is what I want to make my future in. I know people who have done degrees in engineering and then moved into recruitments. I know people who have degrees in history and are very successful advertising professionals. I know people who have degrees in history and then later on did a master's in finance and now are into investments. So it really depends.
Yeah, which is interesting because, of the thousands of students I tend to meet, somehow they've decided at 17, the next 5 years, I'm going to do my whatever economics or a business or whatever, and this is the kind of job, this is the company I'm going to go into, versus that you can actually move 2-3 careers by the time, because somehow there's that fixated space that one tends to operate in, isn't it? Whereas in reality, young graduates move a number of careers and roles.
Absolutely. And I have known people who have had, who were working in finance and then moved into advertising and now are successful planners.
There you go. It depends on where that skill comes into within an organization then. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then typically you think somebody did finance would want to have to work in a bank, and not necessarily. The world is no longer that, that kind of slotted way of thinking. It's interesting, right? Because it comes back again to, I'm going to touch again on the liberal arts because that's really important. That's the space that career operates in. And I remember reading this interview, which I kind of like in Economic Times, where Infosys and a few other companies had quoted about hiring more liberal arts graduates. They said than IT graduates, because they thought that they could skill them up on technical skills, but there was something that, so do you see that trend as well in tech? Do you think that's given your experience in the tech space?
So in the tech space, and I'll be completely honest, in the tech space, not so much. So I have seen, when I look at people with liberal arts, again, it's dependent on the function that they want to apply for, but they do have a lot more holistic experience and the confidence that they come with, which, sometimes it does happen, but when people come with an IT background, they particularly might not interview as well. Right. So when you have a liberal arts degree, and you've like got experience and exposure to so many different subjects, you tend to be a little more holistic in your approach.
That's interesting. So yeah, and that's really the purpose of the qualification that we give, is about that holistic learning and why that's going to be the future. And that's great. If we're doing what the industry expects, I think we have some kind of a decent formula, but I think the goalpost will keep moving. In 5 years, it'll change and it'll keep moving. So,
absolutely.
Let's touch a little on media, which is your new space. So just in terms of media, what kind of roles and jobs are you seeing emerge? Anything that you think interesting that we need to know from your experience?
Absolutely. So I'm still learning because, so you'll be surprised, even after 2 decades of experience, I'm still trying to upskill myself and learn about media because, it's an alien industry to me, even though they say they're tech, but they're not, because their tech is absolutely baffling. And I can tell you that because I think media has taken a whole new turn in today's day and age because it's all about looking at all that data which is coming in. So, for example, the kind of and making your and reaching out to your audience in a more personalized fashion, right? So that and how do you reach to that decision? That's through data, and it's very interesting. So yeah, I mean, again, the kind of people that we are hiring are highly data driven.
Wow. That's it's just phenomenal to see how much that's come to play. I mean, we do have data as a compulsory program in the first year, but there's always, but what I think we do in Korea is ensure there's a strong dose of ethics along with that, which kind of becomes, how do you kind of become ethical data scientists when you do your job? If we were going to kind of, look gazing into that future, and you say these are the kind of industries that, let's say 5 years from now or 4 years from now, would be the highest recruiter. I mean, we didn't kind of think the companies of today would be as recruited. So do you have any kind of emerging trends you see, emerging industries you think that are going to become highest recruiters?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I think with no one anticipated the situation that we're going to be in today. So we're in unprecedented times. And I think it's very interesting because being part of the media industry, you start looking at trends as to where the growth is going to be, right? And what's next. So obviously the pharma industry or the life sciences industry is going to be really huge in the next few years because there's a lot of dependency on that industry. And then e-commerce, online e-commerce is again going to be something which is going to come up in a big way because a lot of people are going to be at home. Their buying styles are going to change. Their buying trends are going to change. Consuming trends are going to change, so on and so forth. And then edutech, right? Online technology and online education is also another place where I do see a lot of growth. And I think that was an industry which was already emerging before COVID hit. But post-COVID, it's going to be another big industry.
Interesting.
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
And I think then the other industries which are going to emerge, I know the automobile industry was down in slumps, but I think going forward, people are going to start preferring to own their own cars. And that is also going to pick up.
That's interesting. Those are some interesting insights. I'm going to move on some questions from students and we'll come back because these were some preset questions that we had got from feedback from them. So Arnav here asks a question about websites, going into websites like Google, Uber, where they say particularly have preference in majors chosen for degrees and are usually in economics or computer science or business rather than history. So do these preferences of companies weigh in on preferences of applicants?
So when you see job descriptions on any of the career sites with any of the companies, and they specifically require a discipline in terms of the degree that you're bringing to the table. So if you have a lot of years of experience and you worked in that field, then obviously the degree is not that relevant. But if you're starting out, then the degree does become relevant from that standpoint for that particular role, which again is not to say that you will not be a fit for a different role.
Fair enough. Okay, that's interesting. So Ananya's just kind of sent hers, I haven't had time to quickly read that, but in a day and age where technology is booming, what would you say to an undergrad majoring in a non-IT field, and how important and to what extent would an individual have to equipped with tech abilities?
So hi Ananya, and thanks for your question. So I think tech abilities, I think are very, very important. And I think everyone needs to be technologically not challenged, and they need to be aware of, whatever little technology is around them. Like I said earlier on, that you have to keep upskilling yourself. Now, it's obviously completely dependent on what is it that you want to do. If you want to get into a field, let's say like policy, then obviously tech really does not play such a huge role in your life. If you want to get into HR, then again, technology does play a role, but not possibly to that extent. So it really depends on what is it that you want to do. Is it sales, marketing, or is it something else? So it's going to be dependent on that, even if it's a non-IT field. So even if you're joining an Uber or a Google or any of your new age companies, it's going to be dependent on the function.
Fair enough. And Archit here wants to know which sectors, which is again, we touched on it's no longer industries but roles, but where you see data analytics going to have the greatest scope. Which companies, which kind of sectors or industries are going to employ a lot of data analytics?
So Archit, it cuts across all organizations. So for example, let me give you an example so that you can better understand this, right? So let's say if it's Zomato. Let's take an example of Zomato since we are talking about that, right? So Zomato takes a look at, okay, I have these many people in, let's say, Gurgaon or Delhi or whichever location. And these many people tend to order non-vegetarian food or Thai food or Chinese food. And these many people tend to order Indian food. So I'm going to use this data that's coming into me and I'm going to push out ads or suggestions to them, which is more relevant to them, right? So that's an example with regards to Zomato. So similarly, in a media company, data is so critical now because we are taking all these insights that are coming to us from different tools and analyzing them and then seeing, what are the areas where this information needs to disseminate to, right? So it cuts across all industries. So if you look at pharma, if you look at the drugs, how are those drugs doing in the market? What's been the feedback? Data cuts across all industries. There's no one specific industry where the scope is greater versus the other.
That's interesting. Chirag is going to ask on something very different about the sports industry and what changes are we going to see? And considering the COVID, which is kind of an inflection point, if you like, is that going to change that industry?
Yeah, I think, so recently we had this new age company that entered India, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, which was called CultFit, right? And I think everyone was a member, everyone was very excited about it because it was a new way of working out, right? And it was very class driven and people were getting healthier, feeling good about themselves, and then COVID hit. What happened post-COVID? They still needed to go on, but they changed their entire strategy. Everything became online. They started hosting classes online to their members, right? And so they didn't need a physical space anymore. So the sports industry is also going to change because now people might not be able to go to a gym physically, but they still need to work out. They still need to feel good about themselves. And I don't know how long it's going to take before people are actually able to go there, right? Or if you see Virat Kohli's videos or anything else, you see that they are still working out, but in their little constraints. So maybe technology is going to drive those for them and help them with it to keep a track of their fitness goals.
Yeah. And interestingly, one is the fitness bit, and also in terms of how are we going to get sporting events done, because it's whole lot of things that rides on fans coming into stadiums, fan management. There were all these allied roles when compared to sports, which will now have to move to a lot more online because gaming, and whether there are other ways that will take over. Interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, that's a very interesting point that you bring up, Kala, because, advertising was hugely driven by all these sporting events, especially like cricket and, and all of that. But now, because the stadiums are not going to be full, it's going to be a very, very different world because there's going to be a lot more reliability on streaming. So that's where the tech is going to come in, and that's where you're going to reach out to your audience.
Yeah. And I'm going to digress before I go to the question. Tell me a bit on what's happening on the OTT, the whole, that space. It'll be fantastic to get any early insights. Are you seeing that's going to be one of those biggest booms in terms of what's happening?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's going to be huge for everyone. I mean, I'm sure, like, if right now I were to ask everyone to raise their hand, how much consumption are they doing? Everyone's going to be at over 100%, right? Because that's their outlet, and I think OTT is going to become huge. Just that's going to be the new big thing. Yeah, Netflix is in for a ride. I mean, they're really riding the wave right now.
They are. And do you think that some of these OTT especially would look at tech and non-tech, because you need a diverse set of skill sets, right? When you, or perspectives for this industry.
Yes. So absolutely. Again, I mean, the biggest challenge that I see with regards to OTT right now is the content creation, right? So for them, that's going to be the biggest challenge, and they will require different skill sets because we might be in the near future viewing very, very different kind of content than what we are currently. Because obviously people cannot be in the same space.
Yeah.
So it's going to be interesting to see how that evolves.
Yes. This question again comes from Arnav saying, students in general during undergrad, they're trying to explore several disciplines. And by the time they realize what they want to focus on, it's almost time to graduate. So do you have any kind of advice on what's a structured way to go about something like this? And how do we kind of maximize your experience and interest while in college?
Absolutely. So, Arnav, when I started out, I had three professions in mind. And I said, if profession A doesn't work out, I want to do profession B. If that doesn't work out, I want to do profession C. Right. So I started working towards profession A, and that completely bombed. And then profession B, I was like, okay, fine, let me, try that. And I started out with that, but because of life situations, I had to move to the US, and I just happened to fall into profession C, right, which is what I'm doing now. And this was my third choice; it was not my first choice, but I'm loving it. You need to figure out what are those. Obviously, don't have 10 choices in front of you. You'll never be successful. Choose the top 3, 4 max, and kind of think, okay, these are some things that I want to do in life, right? And try to put your focus and just prioritize them in terms of, this is the first thing that I want to do, the second thing, the third thing, and then start working towards them. I'll give you an example. I recently spoke to someone who has been in recruitment, but their ultimate goal in life is to start their own NGO, right? And but they've been in recruitment. So what I advised them was, why don't you work in an NGO as in recruitment, so that you kind of gain that experience? Or why don't you start working in policy so that you understand what all it entails, and then move into doing your own NGO? So you need to really figure out and introspect what your end goal is and what is it that you want to do.
Yeah. And now if you want to go deeper into that question, feel free to post an additional one. But moving on, Gauri has a question here, which again, these are specifics to her area of study. Social studies background more broadly. What kind of roles or functions would that suit? And I think you've touched on it, but anything extra that you want to kind of say?
So Gauri, again, it would be dependent on what is it that you want to do. Now, that's a very generic question, right? Social studies. So is it like, are you doing civics, or I don't know if social studies definition has changed now, or is it history? Because during my time, it was very different, right? So I had all the three: geography, history, and that all comprised of social studies. And now if it's all put together, I mean, it again really depends. You can go into any kind of field. You can also do sales. You can do marketing. And it's going to be a little difficult, obviously, to get into marketing, because they need to see, maybe you have the marketing skills, but you're not studying for it. Or you have that aptitude, but you might not be studying for it.
Fair enough. When we talk about hiring trends, this comes from Ananya, we talk about hiring trends becoming more individual based than degree centric. And hence, what's the value of the ever changing or ever popular MBA? How is that changing? And versus another master's degree. So are you going to see that MBA bit continue?
So that's a great question, Ananya. I know there's always a rat race for an MBA, whereas MBA is very, very good to have, but I don't always look at an MBA when I'm speaking to a candidate or if I think a candidate is good. But if you have a master's degree or if you're upskilling yourself and you know your stuff and if you know the functional area really, really well, I think for me that holds a lot more weightage than an MBA.
Okay, great. And Sarthak has a question about, okay, we've touched on who you are, what you've studied, but where you come from a bit. So does it matter, for instance, which university did they come from? For example, would you prefer a graduate from an IIT or a graduate, let's say, from SRM, assuming both candidates are more or less similar in terms of suitability for a position? And hence, how does that brand name affect recruitment?
So the complete honest truth, Sarthak, unfortunately, is that for corporates, and especially if you look at companies like Google and so on and so forth, it does matter. Okay, and I'm not going to beat around the bush and say, no, it doesn't matter. I'm going to give you a very straight answer. It does matter. But with that said, if it's also about your experience and what you bring to the table. If you're a very qualified candidate and you know everything, it's not necessary that candidate from IIT versus you. It's not necessary that that candidate will get a job and you won't. You will too if you can present yourself well. That's why I said it's very essential to know your basics, to know your fundamentals, to present yourself well with confidence, and you'll get it over anyone else.
And so I'm going to ask a very leading question because I have a role here. A university like Kriya, right? So now this is a founding batch. We know what we're doing is new. We have a set of students who we know we've chosen through a very unique process. And we know our students would stand out when we put them out there. But we don't have history. And what is it as a new university that we will have to do with corporates, besides engaging you like this, to say, come and have a look at some of our students?
So that's a great question, Kala, because I think eventually you would also, possibly doing internship tie-ups with a lot of different corporate organizations to give that kind of exposure, right? And not just tie-ups for different functions within an organization and the kind of companies that you can get on board. That's where the real deal is. And I think that will help the students as well, because it'll give them that platform and help them get that corporate experience and learn for themselves what works and what doesn't work, and what they would be good at and interested in.
Great. So that's part of the plan. So we've got, at the end of the first year, because our students do a general first year, and as I shared with you, they actually go ahead and do an internship of a role, whether it's data analysis or writing or whatever, but within a social organization, a development organization, to connect closer to cause. And at the end of the second year, once they've picked a major, is when we start looking at the corporate internships, because they're far more, our feedback has been, and I'm going to come back to this again, there's been a lot of discussion on this internally, whether are students ready at the end of their first year without having done any major, where they've just come out of school more prepared for corporate, or are they better off after the second year? I've had a lot of feedback second year. What's your personal take?
So I would say second year, because I think when you're right out of school and you get into a different environment, which is like out of school into college, I would definitely say by the end of the second year, because there's still a lot of learning and maturity that you kind of need to gain in order to be part of a corporate organization, because there's a lot of discipline which is required, self-discipline, and especially in the kind of environment that we are in right now, because everyone's working from home.
Fair enough.
So, and just from an understanding standpoint, and you have the rest of your life to go. So it's always good to take that break, just understand everything, understand your subject, and then try to, introspect, figure yourselves out, and then get into a corporate experience, because you'll be able to give it more justice, in my opinion.
Yeah, they would be able to add more value, and I guess it's a great opportunity for the organization then to look at, as you said, if internship is a way of actually finding a career or a job immediately after. Advait wants to talk about the gig economy. There's been a lot of talk about the gig economy recently and how it has opened up a lot of time for people to pursue other passions, explore their hobbies, and live a fuller life in general. So is it actually a viable alternative to a stable career?
If you're successful.
Yeah, it's always in retrospect.
Right, exactly. I mean, yeah, a lot of people, do this on the side, and they start off with a stable career, and then they start doing this on the side. And when they become successful is when they move to doing, following their passion.
Yeah. So Arnav's on a roll here. He's got another question. So you don't have to feel sorry, Arnav, because I warned Mona enough. There's going to be a lot of questions, and that's why she said she's going to be around to answer questions. So don't worry. Recently, there's a phenomenon of interdisciplinary majors where you explore several majors instead of one. Sometimes you don't go into the amount of depth one would ideally like pursuing pure majors. However, the combination of majors gives you a much broader perspective. What do you think of this new trend?
I think it's phenomenal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, I think it's hard on students, and you might not get that depth. But I think it's good because it really opens up your mind in a whole lot of different ways.
Okay. So it's more like jack of all trades, or it's fine to be a jack of all trades in that sense, does it?
I mean, I don't think, because, when you're still studying, you still have a lot to learn. So once you join, I've given you examples, right, where people mid-career or, after working for 4 or 5 years in a particular field have changed completely and switched gears completely from industries, from finance to advertising, from engineering to HR to, I mean, so you never stop learning actually. And if you think that's the way, it opens up your mind, it gives you exposure to different things, because that is not the ultimate goal of your life, right? I mean, there's still going to be more that's going to come, and you might again switch careers, and you might again switch your discipline completely, even after doing a multidisciplinary, studying, and then post that you'll be like, okay, I want to try something completely different.
Yeah. Chirag has a question here, and this is, and he goes through online classes. Sorry, just something rolled. Through online classes, we have already seen how discussions have changed as opposed to in-class discussions. So how do you think the dynamics within a team in any career, will change over time? And do you see, I guess this is more in context of now, do you think these discussions will be as fruitful as before? Also now, due to the pandemic, could any company be expecting from young students, young graduates who come out like this? Do you think we will have a greater emphasis on how versatile students are with technology, which you touched on? But I think I'd go back to his earlier question, which is about team dynamics, working in teams. How is that going to change?
Absolutely. So that's a very interesting question, Chirag, and I'm sure all of us are thinking that. So let me just give an example. So the company where I'm working right now, I joined them 6 days before we went into lockdown, right? So out of which, so 6 days is when I actually physically went into office and met 3 people from my team, and I have a team of 15 people. And I've not connected with anyone because they're virtually placed in different places. But what ended up happening is that we started connecting, and we did a little agile methodology where we're connecting every day. We start our day by connecting together, talking about what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done, what are the priorities, and so on and so forth. And you'll be surprised, the feedback that I've gotten is that they have, through their entire career at the organization, not been so connected and not felt like one team that they do now. And that's because of the fact that I think now corporates are taking greater initiatives in connecting virtually and making sure everyone's connected all the time. Now, coming back to your question with regards to in-class discussions versus, online classes, it is hard. It is not easy. And you guys will have to put in extra work and put in extra effort because that's just what it is. We are in different times. Everyone needs to change according to the times that we're in. But just look at it like you're going to be better equipped to face the world tomorrow, which we want when we were growing up, but you have the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. So this comes to the Q&A. So Pranesh here asks about social work. So doing something for your community, extracurricular, how do they actually help in building your profile? Do they actually help at all?
So honestly, if I see a resume of a person and they have passionately talked about something that they believe in and they stand for, it just does not, it shows me, gives me insight into what kind of a person they are. Because that takes a lot and it's not easy. You're giving back to the community and it's not like you're gaining anything monetarily out of that. It's something which you're doing because you're passionate about it. So it shows me your passion. It also talks about teamwork. It also talks about project. It's how you manage that project, what you achieve out of it. I give 12 out of 10 for CSR projects. And I think they're very critical.
Fantastic. So we're doing something really good then with our students actually going into doing something like that in their first year summer.
Because I think it's foundation building, Kala, honestly.
Yeah. Thanks for validating that. And let me also come into another question, which is about research. So we talked about social work, but also Pranesh's question is linked in terms of anything about their experience in research or their engagement. Does that probably defines the roles? Yeah,
absolutely. I think that's also very critical. Again, going back to data, research is something which is very, very critical because it obviously creates a path towards, research analysis, data, AI, all of those things. So yes, very critical. If that is a field that you want to grow in, obviously.
There's a question here, I don't know from who, but it's about freelancers. Do you see that industry growing at all as a kind of role?
So that's a very interesting question. It is something which is growing, but it's highly unstable, right? So when companies, especially like in a time that we are in right now, and when they start looking at their headcount and organizational development and everything, it's great to have the freelancers because obviously, then you get a balance of following your passion as well as doing, what you're doing. But it's an unstable environment. So, I have done that in my life and in my career because I believed that I would want to be part of different organizations and learn different things from different organizations. But in hindsight, it's better to be part of an organization as a full-time employee. In the middle, if you do want to be a consultant and you want to do freelance work, sure, go ahead, do it and explore. But your main focus, majority of your career should be in being full-time. You can take a break, do freelance for a bit, but it is an unstable career.
Yeah. This is an interesting question, and this is often what our students from the sciences tend to ask, and this comes from Gautam. Let's look at students who come from pure sciences background, from a pure sciences university versus a student who comes with a sciences background. Let's say I've done biology, a bit of sociology or politics or psychology. How are they treated? What's the kind of career opportunity difference that both of them might have?
So again, it would be dependent, right? It would be completely dependent on function because everything is driven by the function and not so much by the company. So the first driver is the function that you want to go into, and then the second driver is the company and its culture and what they look for, right? So when you talk about sciences, now science is very, very large. So if you're talking about computer sciences, for example, right? When it comes to computer sciences and IT, sometimes it does matter. If you're coming from a university that is known for it, versus coming from a university that is not known for it. But again, like I said before, that it's completely dependent on what you bring to the table and how you present yourself. So as an undergrad student, when you're looking for a job, how do you stand out from the rest of the people? And that is what's critical.
And I think his question, Gautam's question was more around the pure sciences. So, which is, and I often hear this anecdote somewhere that, do you want to be a biologist or a better biologist? So it's about that, how sociology sometimes adds, how environmental study sometimes adds to that. And I've often heard that from a couple of colleagues from large companies like Biocon, who kind of say, yeah, pure sciences is great, but when you have the understanding of context of applying science to society, somehow you become a different candidate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Arnav is back with a question, which is, several companies have technical interviews, which makes students really anxious. Given that nowadays companies have several rounds of interviews, how does one really work for it other than by practice? Most students do get perplexed when put on a spot. Any kind of preparation advice you'd give?
Yes, Arnav, it's not only students who get perplexed when they put on the spot, all of us do. So you'll be surprised, all the interview rounds, even when I have had in tech organizations, there's been a lot of whiteboarding, right? And trying to understand so that's a strategy which companies use. That's to see how you perform under pressure, because these are high pressure organizations and you need to think on your feet. So you need to prepare for interviews. I reject candidates if they come in for an interview and they have no idea what the organization is about. They're not prepared at all. It doesn't work because it's a very competitive field out there. I mean, the competition is so huge. That's why you have to prepare for an interview. Your thought process needs to be very crystal clear. When you come in, you should be a subject matter expert.
Yeah, interesting. I'm assuming this does come from a parent who asks, what do you believe are some of the necessary things one should need to do to upskill themselves? You touched on data, definitely. Would you recommend certain courses, books, or some things that they should do during this quarantine period to improve themselves in general, not with respect to any specific field?
It has to be what you're interested in. I'm a huge believer that you need to follow your passion, what you're interested in, because if you try to do something that you're not interested in, you're never going to be successful at it, even though it sounds very cliched, but it's very, very true. So you need to really enjoy it. And yes, you should always constantly keep upskilling yourself. And I cannot emphasize on that enough. Even when you're in a job, whatever opportunity you get, whatever is your interest, besides the core function that you're studying, besides that, keep upskilling yourself. Maybe if it's a language that you want to learn, right? Or maybe if it's another course that you want to take, or, if you're interested in policy, maybe if you want to take up a course in policy, if it's marketing, you want to take up a course in marketing, or if it's, data, take up another extra course in data. Be it anything, but whatever you're interested in, you have to keep adding onto your skills because it's just going to help you. Or, if it's project management or program management, if that is a field that you want to get into. Learn about different functions, there's a whole plethora of jobs and roles over there that we don't even think of, right? So be it law, be it legal. Within legal itself, you have so many different functions, right? So it's not just criminal law, it's not just corporate law, but you also have IP law, right? Which is intellectual property law, and which is also another very interesting field. So you really need to know what is it that drives you, and then basis which you should definitely upskill yourself.
It's interesting you touched on law firms, because I had this very interesting discussion recently. And the presumption that it's lawyers who join a law firm versus how many social sciences study students that law firms are looking for, because whether that's land rights, child custody, cases of separation, these have gone up in terms of the recent times, and they tend to need a lot of social researchers, if you like, or sociology scientists to write up the case for them, to actually research some of these backgrounds and put it together. So I understand law firms are now recruiting a lot more social studies students to work with the lawyers to give some of those perspectives. So in fact, I'm going to shortly invite a speaker from that angle, because these were some industries we didn't even think about. And it comes back to what you're saying. If you start looking at careers by industry, you're restricting yourself versus this is what I love doing. And let's kind of open every industry there where I think where this will apply, which makes so much of a difference, isn't it? This comes from Lochna, and I'm going to kind of slightly tweak it in the bit, is about discovering one's own likes and dislikes, right? So you kind of, the graduation comes on to you, you're suddenly thinking, what am I going to do? You had this wonderful 3 years. And she wants to ask you, have you had a personal dilemma in the past where you didn't know what did you like or not? And how did you channel yourself to find out your likes and dislikes?
Absolutely. I think I'm constantly in a dilemma in terms of, when I started out in my career, so I did not really, I had 3 choices in front of me, or 3 things that I was really interested in, which I wanted to pursue. And like I told you, the first didn't come through, and I was quite heartbroken because that didn't happen. But I guess everyone at that age, when you're, 18 and 20, you get heartbroken when things don't happen for you. But then I started pursuing my second one. And I actually started my career in public relations, and I was working with Lintas. So I know, Kala, you were working with JWT, but I was with the PR arm of Lintas, which was Lin Opinion at the point of time, and that's what I started out in. And I absolutely loved it. And I thought it was phenomenal. But then soon after, I moved to the US, and that's when the economy was in recession, and there were no jobs, and obviously no one was hiring in PR, right? And that was an industry which was very badly hit. And that's when I switched my career. So you always need to be open, and that's when I joined an executive search firm, which is called Spencer Stewart. And I joined them in the technology vertical. And that's how my career started out in recruitment. And that's what I've stuck to, because that was another thing that I never thought that I would love so much as I do today. So, I think you should never be worried about exploring different things. Be open to it. If one does not work out, it's okay. Have your second option in the back pocket and then explore that further. But I think the world is so dynamic today that you should never keep yourself restricted to only one thing. And definitely try your hardest for that one career that you really want to pursue and give it your 200%. But then post that, it could be something else.
Yeah, it's very interesting what you said. Ever since I was 16, I wanted to be in advertising. That's all I worked to. I went and got an MBA from a top management institution. I only applied to JWT from campus because I was very sure that's the only advertising agency I wanted to join. It was exactly after a year I quit because I realized suddenly what I love doing is creative planning, and the world is beyond advertising to do that. And hence, while I've moved with education as an industry, with foreign government, or wherever, or even what I'm doing today in the university, is about how do you creatively plan and what do you execute. And then you suddenly realize what you actually love is a role, and it doesn't matter which organization or what you're surrounded by doing it. So you could just what you think exactly what you want in 5 years can actually burst a bubble. But while staying connected to the role was very important, but whether that's what you want to do day in and day out is slightly different.
Absolutely, because I think PR and advertising, when I was part of it, that's also marketing, right? Because you're marketing something. And again, in HR or recruitment, again, that's what I'm doing. I'm marketing an organization, but an organization that I believe in.
Yeah. I'm going to touch back to that question that parent asked. Do you recommend at all, when in the recent times, coming back to any online courses that you might have seen that you want to recommend, a book that you might want to recommend as a prepper?
I mean, not one specific, because I think there's so many. Again, like I said, it's very functional driven, and Unfortunately, I will not be able to give you a name of one specific book that I feel like you should,
can
because
send me an email of some
I can send you
reading.
an email, absolutely.
Yeah, which I can share with students on some courses that might be interesting, because the idea is, they said, I think the question was more around, if it's not field specific, what can I just do generally to improve myself as a person, to make the presentability better, and take it from there. There was the question here about referral. How important are referees, and how does one go about that? Do you see those playing an important role where some
Referrals
jobs?
in terms of organizations?
Yeah, as in when you apply for jobs, have several roles today have become referral based. How does one go about this when applying for these roles?
Yes. So it is something which is important. And that's why you need to create your online presence. So you have to realize that it's not just about sending in a resume into an organization. How do you touch base with that organization? So again, it's a whole strategy that you have to put together, where um, you start connecting with people. So first you need to create your branding, who you are. So you start putting that together. Either you start your own blog, or you start writing, and writing is a very, very critical skill. And from whatever questions I'm seeing on the chat window, I can tell all of you have that skill. So I'm really happy to see that, because I feel that's a very critical skill, soft skill, for you to have across any industry, any function. And that is what's going to make you stand apart. So definitely create a brand for yourself. Write blogs, write about subjects that really interest you. If it's designing, then post your design online, and then start or make vlogs or whatever it is, and then create LinkedIn pages for yourself. Start adding projects over there. Start marketing yourself. Start being a part. Join groups that you're interested in on LinkedIn, and start creating a network for yourself. Start having discussions with people. Start being part of forums. And then post that, start following companies that you want to be a part of. Right? So once you start doing that, then you learn a lot more about that organization. So you're not going into it blind. That's the worst thing that you can do for yourself. And then post that, you start reaching out and connecting to people. And it's okay. More than half of them will never connect with you, but it's fine. You have to be a little persistent. You have to ask them, and just don't send them a request. Tell them why you want to be connected to them. Or you read something that they had written, or you read an article they had written, or you saw an interview that they did, or whatever it may be, and then reach out to them that way. So you have to start creating your brand and start creating your network from now on itself. That will lead you to be in a better place when you're ready to graduate. When you leave college and you decide, okay, these are the companies I want to be a part of. You've already created that network, and then one of you can refer you, because it does hold a lot of value.
Great. You've been on for 1 hour, 10 minutes, and I don't want Zoom fatigue to get to you, because you've been talking too much. So I'm going to take this as the last question, and I want to take this as the last question because it comes back to where we started. So Lochana has a very interesting question. She says that as a person, I love chemistry. I'm interested in chemistry, but there's lots of peer pressure saying, take economics and data because that's what will get you a job. And that's what the country needs as future talent. And so how do I draw a line between what I love doing and what the world wants of me? So I know we're closing back to that loop is, where do we strike that balance?
No, I think, Losha, you should stick to what is it that you find interesting, and, and start researching on what are the possible fields that you can get into. Like I said, pharma is an industry which is going to pick up in a big way, right? Because of the situations that we are in, and it's never died. Historically, take a look at that industry trend. It's never gone down, right? So there's so much more that you can do. It's not only always about, the tech or advertising or marketing. There's so many other industries that you can explore. And if that's your passion, follow it. Look at pharma industries, look at biosciences, look at life sciences. There's so much that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been hearing about how much public health, just the investments now that will actually go back into health and health research and just public health systems is going to be very huge, which means we're going to need public health economists. We're going to need public health investment analysis, insurance companies, what they're going to do. We're going to need society, social scientists and public health. So it's kind of, it's just this future of this, some of these practices are going to open up humongously.
Yeah, you just need to widen your horizon. You cannot be restricted to the few industries that you're aware of. Do a lot of research because everything's going to be dependent on, there's so many jobs out there that we have not even thought of. Like Kriya never existed when I was growing up. I wish it did, but unfortunately it did not. But that doesn't, you can now take hold of your career and drive your career. So Kala, if you don't mind, I do want to take this question from Chirag.
So on the online
question.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, on the chat, please.
So Chirag's question is, many people don't have access to proper internet connections and are not equipped with the skills to operate online. Do you think this group of people will be at a disadvantage now that everything is shifting online? Do you see any way for us to ensure everyone has an equal chance in whichever field they wish to be a part of? So, Chirag, that's a great question. And I think that is a reality today. Yes, not everyone in India has access to proper internet connections. And it is something which is going to be critical, but I think there are ways of going about it. You can download, whenever the connection is good enough, you can download a lot of reading material for yourself. You can access it offline and you can use it that way. But I think there are a lot of companies that are looking into it and they're trying, that's going to be another, telecom is going to be another area, another industry which is going to grow. And I think they've been trying to, they penetrate it through the rural sectors where, like a company like Google, where they're giving classes to, women in villages and they're teaching them skills so that they can earn a living for themselves. Or there's so many such programs that are happening that companies are working towards that, we want to give everyone an equal opportunity. We want to ensure that you have an equal chance, but you have to be resourceful and try to figure out what is the best way that you can get access to more information. Because unfortunately, that is true. This is the world that we live in.
Thank you so much for picking that. I thought I had rolled all those questions there when I moved, but thanks for picking that. I think this is fantastic, and I think it's fantastic for two reasons. One is our students have just about earlier this week finished their first year. So it's been a very, very momentous first year. We started in August 2019, the founding batch. There was so much planned. What happened in March was not something we planned for, but they have adapted extremely well to the situation. We've had a set of faculty that has managed to put this through, and we've managed to kind of close the final trimester completely, mostly online, and the year. And hence some of these questions are weighing in a lot of, oh my God, you've done the first year, and when they come back now, they're actually going to pick their majors, and we really hope that's going to be very soon back in campus. And I guess the next year will be all about everything you're talking is about how do we get the resume in place, how do we get the LinkedIn profiles, to all that longer term planning. So this is our very first session dedicated to that, and you were fantastic and you were so easy, and thank you so much for what seemed a very easy conversation with you, and I'm sure that all students got a lot out of that. The recording, we of course recorded it, so we'll share it with a lot of students. And the reality of what you said, many are in spots where they cannot log in to hear some of what you're saying, and which is one of the reasons why we record and share these with our students as well. And your association with Kriya will continue for sure, and we hope to see you sometime back. And if there's any way at all, whether that's externships is an area we're exploring, which is just give us projects which our students can work on. And, we'll give you multidisciplinary kind of interest students to look at one problem. And I guess that's the foundation which we're built on, that one problem can't have a single lens solution. It needs to kind of bring in, which is what we do. So we'd love to explore those kind of opportunities and continue to keep this going with Kriya. So thank you so much, Mona. Thanks for your time. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you so much, Kala. Thank you so much, Kala, for having me. And I hope, my answers were useful to the students and to the parents. At any given point of time, I'm more than happy to help in whichever way. So if any of your students have any other questions or parents have any other questions, feel free to direct them my way, and I would be happy to send you responses and let you know what my thoughts are. But I wish you all the best, and congratulations to all of you for completing your first year. That's a big, big step and very exciting. And it seems like you are already on your path to, just looking at your thought process, the way you're asking your questions, I think you guys are going to be very successful.
Thank you so much, Mona. I'll kind of share all the thanks across to you. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Go have a well-deserved break off the weekend. Although, now it's like working from home, we seem to be continuously at it, but.
That's true. That is very true. But
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Wishing all of you a great weekend as well. Thanks a lot for having me, Kala. Bye-bye.
Bye.